Hey guys, how's it going? So I thought I'd start by doing a little series I'm calling the Guitar Crash Course. And this is going to be number one in the series. So maybe you just got a guitar for Christmas and you've never picked one up. Um, Maybe you've been playing a little while and you kind of hit a spot. Maybe you're learning some scales and you've learned a few chords. Um, Somebody just said, "Hey, here, play this," and you have no idea what you're playing. You have no idea why you're playing it and why it works. Um, so that's kind of what I'm gonna try to do for you guys is demystify this instrument just a little bit. Um, but first, we're gonna start with a keyboard. And you see little uh, my little hand drawn keyboard there. Not very good, but it'll have to do. I've got some stuff written down here. I'll go through and explain all this in a little bit, but suffice to say, um, a piano keyboard, isn't very different from a guitar. Um, a piano keyboard is a little more visually laid out in a logical sense, as opposed to a guitar. I mean, it's they're still laid out similarly. If I could talk, words are hard and the struggle's real. Um, but this kind of helps us to see how where the music goes. Um, and the guitar is it's a difficult instrument to learn. So why don't we start? Let's just start with just basic music knowledge. So what is what where do we start? Well, let's look at this layout here. So as you can see, we have a repeating pattern, um, and our note scale runs from A to A. So A, and there's an A sharp or a B flat, then a B, then a C, then a sharper flat, then a D, then a sharp flat, then an E, then an F, then a sharp, then a G, then a sharp, then an A, then a sharp, and we're gonna keep repeating. So you always notice there's a set of three black keys, a set of two black keys, 3 2 3 2, repeating for as long as you make that keyboard, and that's the pattern it's gonna follow. So how is this laid out? These notes or these keys on a piano are laid out in half steps. So from this black key or this black key to this white key or this white key is a half step, up or down, right? Up goes this way, down goes this way. So if C to a C sharp is a half step, C to a D is a whole step, C to a D sharp would be a step and a half, C to E would be two whole steps, right? I hope that makes sense. And a guitar isn't very different from that, where we have an open string to the first fret, that's a half step. From the open string to the second fret is a whole step. So if you skip a fret, it's a whole step. Open string to the third fret is a step and a half. Open string to the fourth fret, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Um, we could be here all night, just discussing. And these steps are what we call intervals. Okay, and all an interval is the distance between two notes, whether that's a whole step, a half step, a step and a half, two steps, whatever. It's just a fancy word for saying the distance between two notes. So if somebody says, "Oh, what interval is that?" Don't get too thrown off. They're just talking distance. So if they say, "Oh, that's a 3-step interval," well, we can figure that out real easy. Half, whole, whole and a half, two, two and a half, three. That's a 3-step interval. Simple enough, right? So now that we kind of see our correlation between our keyboard and our guitar, we're gonna stick with the keyboard for a little bit, and we're going to use this keyboard to make some sense of all these notes. Because if you were just to play these notes randomly, it's gonna sound kind of bad, right? Because there's no structure, there's no rules to follow, there's no meaning to it. It's just a bunch of random notes. It's kind of like you hear a kid go up to a piano and start banging on it. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. So we've got kind of a set of rules that we follow to create music. So what are those rules? Well, we have things called scales. We have things called chords. We have scales, chords, basically. Scales make up chords are parts of scales. So they're not mutually, I guess they're mutually exclusive. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. You can't have one without the other, basically, is what I'm you can, but it gives you this is to give you a direction to go. So what we're going to start with is how to construct a scale. And that's kind of the rudimentary bits of music. Is we've got to learn to construct. We've got to follow a formula to kind of know where we're going. Otherwise, it's the kid banging on the piano. It's just random. So I actually have it written out here. The WWH, WWWH. And what that stands for is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not. So we're gonna start in the easiest terms here. We're gonna start in the key of C. And because the piano is laid out nice and visual for us, it'll help us get a little better understanding. So here we go. We're going to start on C. And if we look at our formula here, W, that's a whole step. So our first interval for making a scale, a major scale, is a whole step. All right? So that means 2 notes, right? So because we have a half step in between each one. So we have to go two notes. So whole step would be from C up to C sharp would be half step. Back or to D would be a whole step. So it's C to D. That's our first interval. The next one says we need another whole step. The next rule says we need a second whole step. So we're going from D. If we go up to D sharp, that's a half step. If we come down to E, that's from D to E is a whole step. So there's our second. So We have 3 notes right now, C, D, and E. So our next interval says we need a half step. So we're on E. There's no sharp or flat, no black key between E and F. So between E and F is what's called a natural half step. So our next note is F. So we've got 4 notes now, C, D, E, and F. All right. Moving right along. Our next interval says we need a whole step. So we're on F. If we go up to F sharp, that's a half step. Down to G. From F to G would be a whole step, right? All right. Now we need another whole step from G. So we skip that sharp and we go G to A, our other whole step. We need one more whole step. So we're on A. So we're going to skip that A sharp. And we're going to go to B. And then our last interval says we need a half step. So, oh, look, we have another set where there's no black key in between it. So again, we've got our next natural half step, which is B and C. So we've constructed a C major chord. And one thing you'll notice is there's no sharps or flats in a C major chord. Or not major chord, major scale, excuse me. So no sharps or flats in a G major scale. It is by far the easiest. Now, on guitar, it's a little more difficult because a guitar is considered a non-C based instrument. So our guitar is not tuned normally to C. Our guitar is normally tuned in what's called fourths, and it's E. So starting on the fat string is E, A, D, G, B, and E. So an easy way to remember that is Eddie ate dynamite. Goodbye, Eddie. So there you go. Going from the fat string to the skinny string. Eddie ate dynamite. Goodbye, Eddie. All right. So now if we take a little bit of that knowledge, we'll grab the guitar and so we know this, our fat string here is an E if it's tuned to standard. So if we look down here, that's where we're starting, E. So our first fret, which is a half step, is going to be F, right? Because we don't have a sharp or flat, right? So then our next fret, so our second fret is going to be F sharp, because we've got that. There's our next half step is to this key right here, which is F sharp or G flat, depending on which. We're not going to get too far into that, but. And then our third fret is going to be G, because we're just going right up the diatonic. This is called a diatonic scale. So it's in half steps. It's diatonic is what it's called. And then G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. So that's all the notes on the E string. If you learn these, you've learned a third of the guitar, because guess what? That string is the same thing. It's E as well. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Simple enough.